Good afternoon and welcome to the first ADISA podcast, but it's the first in a series of podcasts. My name is Steve Mellings. I'm the founder of ADISA. Just a little bit of background. ADISA runs a certification scheme for companies who recover IT assets from businesses and sanitize the data on the media. And we also run an approval scheme for the software overwriting tools that sanitize that media. As part of our sort of remit, I guess, we audit worldwide. We travel worldwide and we look at the ITAD industry worldwide and the changes that we see in each local area. I'm joined today by Fredrik Forslund of Blancco. He's the Vice President of Enterprise Cloud and Erasure Solutions. So Fredrik, welcome today.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's a pleasure being here.
I've heard Fredrik speak internationally at different locations many times, and I think the depth of knowledge that Fredrik has about ITAD globally is really useful for us all to learn from, because we can see where the industry perhaps is going and what opportunities that may present it to us. So very much pleased to have you here, Fredrik. Maybe you can just talk about yourself and Blancco, perhaps to set the scene for those who may not be familiar with Blancco and perhaps your role within Blancco, and we can then move on from that point.
Absolutely, Steve. And the only scary thing about doing that is that I have almost as many years in the industry as Blancco does. Blancco started in 1997 in my neighboring country, Finland. I'm in Sweden, so I'm dialing in from Stockholm. And I joined the industry and the group already in 1999. So we both have more than 20 years of seeing the ITAD industry evolve, and also having the opportunity to travel to different markets and compare and see differences and similarities. So I think my last count was 55 different countries visited, where I've had professional exposure to the industry. From Blancco's point of view, we have always been extremely focused on helping the industry with the data sanitization, as the technical term. Layman's term is more of data erasure. So we help make sure that there's absolutely no customer data left on the assets when they have to go through and come into a second life, so to say.
And in your time, over the 20 years, but also perhaps more importantly recently with your travel internationally, ITAD as an industry, do you see differences globally?
Oh, absolutely. There's a great difference in maturity level in different markets. And I would say that we have some select markets in Europe that have been in the forefront. We have seen great developments and some setbacks in North America over the recent years. In APAC, it's very different depending on where you are in what country. But one thing that has been in common is that we have also seen a globalization trend. Individual ITADs that one used to meet and greet at industry occasions, or just based on being in touch between vendor and customer. Many of those are now part of the same organization, i.e. there has been a lot of consolidation in the industry. Some have left the industry, but there has definitely been a global consolidation that's happened.
We've seen that consolidation as well, without mentioning brands, of course. One of the things that I've seen on a personal level internationally, because of the maturity differences that you've drawn out, is the service delivery element does vary. And from an accreditation scheme, that causes us some differences and some challenges. From your view, clearly the act of sanitization, which you talked about, can be consistently replicated anywhere. But do you see in the industry drivers within each region being different? So the industry behavior being derided by the customer demands on it. Is that different globally?
Yeah, once again, you see different levels of maturity. And if we start at sort of the lowest level, there has always been an element of, I'm standing here at end of life with equipment that I need to get rid of. I don't have the internal resources. Who can help me? It's the base element of solving a problem. But when you start maturing and you're getting away from that problem solving, end of life situation, no budgets available, we just have to get this fixed. And you're maturing into, hey, wait a minute, there's economics here, there's financial gains if we plan for this in a good way, we find a good counterpart, we make sure that equipment can be traded with information in the best possible standards, which means there's a lot of money involved around that thing that used to be just a problem. And then if you escalate it even further, you realize that, well, to be able to release that monetary value, you have to be able to create security, compliance, chain of custody around the processes. You have to make sure that everyone involved can be held accountable, that you have audit trail, and hence the reporting has always been key when you have seen that maturity starting to arise in a market. And then finally, if we step another step forward, I would say that sustainability has emerged radically over the last few years. It's always been present in the industry, but the way it has come to be one of the strongest driving forces that let's make sure that we do not destroy anything unnecessary. It might have been security policies mandating that destruction previously, but now suddenly those are overridden by sustainability efforts, green IT. If it can be reused, it must be reused, and hence a stronger focus in solving that data sanitization, data protection, chain of custody from a sustainability driver rather than a financial driver. So you definitely see different levels of maturity.
What we see persistently worldwide is that the industry generally determines the processes which the customers need to follow. So again, the ITAD process within each region, its level of granularity for reporting and for chain of custody, a lot of it is dependent on that relationship between the ITAD and their customer and how much their customer is participating in key decisions within this. I've seen a change in the last 3 years about questions coming out from customers about ITAD being more technical. There's a greater appreciation of risk management and a greater appreciation of compliance. Have you seen, in your experience, and not just from Blancco, but from working with your partners worldwide, have you seen more of a customer engagement within the process?
Absolutely. And I think this rhymes well with what we have seen. If we take a step back and look at, okay, how have the entire security arena evolved? And one large aspect there has been data privacy. And we have all seen renewed legislations in Europe, in North America, in APAC, in different countries, big IT hubs like India. And this incorporation of data privacy and protecting data as a part of the larger data security puzzle has definitely driven interest in compliance. What are my responsibilities as the data controller? What kind of demands and contracts do I need in place with my data processor? And the ITAD industry will often come into that data processor discussion, and hence we have seen a lot of revised contracts, stronger requirements, and I foresee that this trend will most likely continue to evolve in the same direction.
I agree with you, Fredrik. I've seen from one of my other companies where we consult for clients on data protection, I've seen their maturity about network security, even asset management, when the devices are being used, has changed. There was a little bit of a flippant attitude in many areas, perhaps. And likewise, that means that the ITAD process within those companies was often overlooked, and it wasn't reviewed or viewed as a security process. It was, they saw the physical products, they'd finished with it, so it was disposal, it was waste. So I think, from my side, and the question to you is, ITAD moving forward, is it going to be part of that growing trend towards being better at data protection and being better at information security? Is that where you see the ITAD industry going as part of that community, or do you believe that we will become more about value recovery, the financial aspect of the transaction?
I think I'll fall back on what I might have touched on in the introduction, that the one is strongly dependent on the other. You will not have the opportunity to get into the high-end value recovery unless you have all your hygiene boxes ticked off when it comes to data security, process security, physical security, anything that is required to be in place to protect the end customer's data. If you fail in any kind of dimension when it comes to the data protection, you will soon see how all the other opportunities for financial gains will also be slowly removing step by step, because in this industry, more than any other, I think reputation and trust is also key value drivers.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Fredrik. We've got a slide where I put ITAD, if you like, as an interface between the customer and the brokerage and the waste management process. It's such an important industry for circular economy, and we provide such an important link, if you like, between redundant equipment and the next generation of users. And I often think that aspect of what we do gets hidden beneath the clamor of revenue, of money, and of the proliferation of its waste and discussion about and e-scrap. And for me, the messaging for ITAD, and perhaps this is something to explore with you, is it struggles a little bit of its own identity. The industry has come back, it's evolved, I guess, largely from brokerage, largely from recycling, material recycling, and we've bolted on compliance and security, as you say, and and asset management, and we have better quality companies with a brand to protect entering into this area. Perhaps we should have started with this. Let's talk about ITAD and the definition of what it is. Do you believe that ITAD has a well-defined definition globally, or is it still struggling to create its own identity?
Yeah, no, I think you're touching on something extremely relevant there. Depending on where you are in the world and who you ask, you will get different answers if you ask them to define ITAD, IT asset disposal. But how is it done? What are the key processes that must be in place? What are we requiring from an ITAD partner? And I think an easy way to see the differences is that in some markets, some industries, you will have extremely thorough tenders where people have to bid to win the ITAD contract from a large organization. And those tenders will go through a number of different requirements and a lot of documentation, certifications that needs to be in place, external audits, etc. And if you can't live up to that, you can't compete. In other markets, it might be, a couple of simple phone calls. Can you come and pick up this kind of equipment, and what are you willing to offer if we select that you do it? So just looking at that procurement process can give you an indication on how is ITAD defined in this market, in this industry, or by this end customer.
Agreed, and I think the point's really good, actually. We've got an agenda at ADISA, of course, but I actually even hate our name, Asset Disposal and Information Security Alliance. So that's why we just use the acronym, because disposal paints what we're trying to, or the industry we're trying to represent, as as something which is one way. You dispose of something, and I think ITAD has much more to offer. I think there's far more levels of service offering to provide more quality and benefit to the customer. And what we've seen globally, is to the lead on from your point, is the global maturity of each individual ITAD market is largely not across the whole market. It's almost at an ITAD level, and that ITAD may be operating through good selling, through mature leadership, and they will be able to educate their customers and operate at a different level than a competitor in the same market. And we kind of see, and it's been difficult for ADISA over the 10 years that we've been going to kind of get a feel for regional markets, because it seems to vary almost company to company, and a lot of that is down to the individuals within that company and their customer base. The one thing to try and tie this sort of piece together, perhaps, it's all about the customer, and it's all about the customer's expectation on the industry, I feel, and the industry's ability to seize that as an opportunity. And I think you're quite right, just to link it together, talking about, what is an ITAD and what can they provide. It has to start with, the hygiene part of the service, the sanitization, and then the value recovery piece happens, and the ethical recycling happens, and the commoditization of the components, etc. Do you think the industry has strong thought leadership which can take the customers forward on their own journey, or do you think we still struggle a little bit to get our messaging right?
That's a highly relevant question, and I do think that there is a little bit of a struggle still. There is more to do, and I often find that in many markets the industry is quite scattered. I think it would benefit from more joint industry initiatives that can grow from one market into other markets and create more of a momentum almost globally, where there are clear right and wrongs depending on what you want to focus in on. So there's definitely room for improvement when it comes to sort of joint industry standards, communication, and it's extremely important in my eyes, because once again, it's all about trust, and trust comes from that kind of communication effort, both from individual players, but definitely from the industry. And I think today is a golden opportunity to benefit from the sustainability focus, from the data privacy focus, from also understanding what kind of values are involved in the whole recovery arena. And when I came into this industry, we looked at IBM compatible desktops. If it wasn't IBM compatible, you couldn't erase it, basically. That evolved quickly. Today, we are looking at mobile devices. We're looking at the entire endpoint fleet, tablets, smartphones, laptops, desktops. We're stepping into the data center where you have normal servers, blade servers, storage equipment. And to be able to supply a service to a large organization, I think you as a vendor in the ITAD industry need to have coverage for all of these different asset types and related processes. So when you come with an offering to a customer, you can show that we have best practices in place to protect your data wherever it sits. We can perform services inside your own premises if that's a requirement, to reduce liability or risk when it comes to transportation. We can cover several different regions, countries, markets, and having that professionalism in your own offer, but also how the industry is displayed towards the buying customers is absolute key to stay relevant in today's competitive IT environment.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to get me on my soapbox now, because I agree. And I think Purely from and I don't do this day in, day out, so what I'm about to say was with certain respect to the ITAD community, but I often feel that they're afraid of the complexity or identifying the complexity of what a good ITAD really is. And as you've said, data sits on so many different media types. Now, it's no good just saying, I shred a hard drive. That isn't data protection. That's only one aspect of it. And I often think that one of the challenges that the ITAD industry has, and one of the things that's holding it back a little bit, is to be slightly less blinkered, and that's meant respectfully. But to actually see complexity as a good thing, because where there's complexity, there's business challenges, and where there's business challenges, that's where solutions can really provide the greatest level of benefit to a customer. So actually, if it was dead easy, anybody could do it. I've seen from ADISA's perspective, really, really strong customer service from ITADs, offering all the sort of wraparound of good, strong thought leadership and control of your customers' expectations at that stage. I've seen really strong operational performance, which is a repeatable process that can be done consistently in the right type of facility. I've seen really good tool sets, cross media, really important, Fredrik. Still too many people say, I can do this. Tape is a problem for me. People still don't appreciate that tape should be treated in exactly the same way as a hard drive, with the same level of respect, etc., etc., etc. ITAD is complex, and to do it well, the kit bag that an ITAD has to have needs to be extensive, and that, I think, can be quite off-putting for an ITAD, particularly if it's maturing in its own journey from perhaps coming from a brokerage background, coming from the waste background into this, understanding and appreciating that complexity is actually good. First of all, it's an inhibitor for people entering market, but the second thing is the value proposition of a complex service proposition is much higher. And where there's a value proposition which provides high level, there's clearly a cost attributed to it. I think just going sideways a little bit, if we may, because I'm aware of time here, Fredrik, and you and I can probably chat forever. Let's talk about Blancco's strategy a little bit, because I think we can probably learn. You're one of the global leads in this area. Where do you see the ITAD space going from your perspective, and how are Blancco helping ITADs seize what market opportunities there may be?
Excellent question, and always a challenging question because it requires constant evolvement and development from our side to meet the complexity on the ITAD as a customer side. So what we need to focus on is to constantly develop our software portfolio, meaning that we can do more asset types, because we constantly get new requests from the industry. Here we have volumes of IoT devices, here we have volumes of network gear, and we constantly have to invest a lot of money to be able to keep adding that support. And besides adding that support to new asset types, we also constantly have to review, okay, how do we live up to different compliance and regulation standards and requirements? How do we make sure that our ITAD customers can prove to their customers that the processes they are running on top of our software has no potential issues or shortcomings and can always be deemed to fulfill any kind of standard or requirement. So that takes a lot of effort. And then, I mean, what's the struggle when you're running a large ITAD operation? You're constantly looking for opportunities to improve your efficiency. I want to save seconds, and those seconds times 100,000 when you're processing large volumes become a lot of time and resources. So another challenge for us is to constantly look for those seconds of processing time. How can we make it faster? How can we make it easier? And when I look at the processes that are running in the large ITAD facilities today and compare to what was best practice just 10 years ago, it's an enormous difference on how you can tailor your processes, how you can automate them, how you can make it a lot more efficient, and how your human touch in the process can be reduced, which saves both error as well as financial resources. So I would say those are our constant challenges, improving and making the process better, constantly staying on top of standards and requirements, and then constantly being able to add new asset types and models and different manufacturers, etc., to make sure that we can cover as much as possible that's out there in the industry.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, again, if you look at the product roadmap that's coming along from the manufacturers, and we can talk Internet of Things in a second, it's so important for the ITAD to have a tool set that future-proofs itself against those product lines coming down. Otherwise, it'll be default destroy, or you'll be double, triple handling a device while you work out how to process it. And it is those small pieces of efficiency that actually hit the bottom line most effectively. Let's talk opportunity. I mentioned complexity a second ago, and clearly it's not my train set to play with, but the Internet of Things, it's here. I'm not seeing across all industry, all ITADs in the industry, sort of a deviation from the traditional IT coming through in the volumes that I would expect. Is IoT still are we still not quite at the cycle of it coming into the ITAD market space at the moment, or have you experienced it in your time and on your travels that you're seeing more diverse products coming into this industry?
Definitely more diverse products. We're still early stage when we look at the category that we would classify as IoT, but we are starting to see strong requests when it comes to certain asset types and makes and manufacturers. Something that has grown a lot that we might be wearing on our wrist right now is Apple Watches. Great secondhand market, which is key. And you have big volumes that are starting to be traded and handled around the world, which means you need a professional process to live up to the security requirements. How can I diagnose this? How can I document it? How can we sort of phase it into other assets that we are processing professionally? So it's early stage, but it is definitely developing year by year. And if we're looking at what's developing and other challenges, I would also take the opportunity to bring up not IoT, but just looking at locations. When you and I are having this conversation, normally we would be traveling and meeting up and be in the same room, but at the moment we're using home offices, so we're at home. We still have access. Some of us are starting to use it again, on-prem, at office. We have off-prem in cloud. And having that combination of different locations and then also the complexity of different assets also puts new requirements to what can be processed remotely. How can we as an ITAD service partner help you, Mr. Customer, to process equipment sitting at home offices? It might be still traditional computers and not IoT, but it's sitting in a different location. And hence, challenge is how can it be remotely erased before it can be collected and shipped into larger processing areas where it comes into volume handling, etc. So we both see new devices sitting in different locations, but we also see traditional equipment sitting in odd locations that we also have to face as a challenge in the industry.
Because Blancco are clearly data sanitization experts. The ITAD industry is perhaps coming in, and this is not for everybody, of course, but it's coming in to provide the service of sanitization. What you're suggesting is where we provide that service is evolving as well. So it may not be right now it's in my facility or it's on your premises. But what you're suggesting is, and certainly with COVID-19 and home working being forced upon us globally, sanitization services may be at any number of client locations, and the ability to perform that will enable the recovery of that asset. So do you see that ITAD should start looking at a changing working practice from their client side now before being asked to provide these services? And if so, is this something Blancco is considering within its product development, or is it already there?
It's already happening, I must say, because a lot of our ITAD partners around the world are trusted advisors to the end customer. So the government customer or the enterprise customer is already knocking on their doors, and they are sharing the challenge. We currently have 10,000 laptops deployed in people's home offices. We need to replace 1,000 of those into a newer model next month. How should we do that? And can you imagine the cost of providing absolutely bulletproof chain of custody and secure transportation to 1,000 individual home offices to collect those computers? But if you can erase them remotely, harvest a report, and then utilize any kind of cost-efficient transportation where you only have to consider the value of the asset and not the value of the data. That is happening, and it is something that has evolved and developed as capabilities and mature processes over the last few months in, I would say, record speed. I've never seen such fast development of a sort of certain process requirement before. But we are also living in very strange times compared to a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is clear on a personal level for everybody. It's challenging, but from a business level, it's also quite exciting, because where change exists, opportunity exists, as far as I'm concerned. And whilst we are all clearly frightened about the bigger picture, there is a little bit of us that says, let's look at change and try and take advantage of what problems may be coming up our way from our customers, and delivering solutions and services which meet those problems and doing it better than our competitors. And it's one of those things where you kind of do wish the industry to help them on their maturity and to help them moving forward. And in terms of that, what help does Blancco do in terms of helping your customers see this vision and share the vision with you? Do you offer any training, or is there any way that they can plug into your thought leadership?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a strong relationship with hundreds of ITADs around the world since many, many years. So with most of them, we have ongoing conversations and information exchange, but we also offer regular sessions where we have some of our technology experts that dedicate time, and they will offer sort of industry-related webinars. Of course, we try to be present at bigger physical events. We haven't seen too many of those the last few months, but I foresee that when things go back to normal, that will continue to gather the industry. We have some events both in North America, Europe, as well as APAC that draw a lot of people, and those arenas where people get together and have active exchanges of best practices, insights, recent cases, challenges. They are very stimulating for us as a vendor, and I think for everyone involved in it. So definitely lots of opportunity to participate and increase that communication within the industry, and we're trying to do our best to be part of that.
Excellent. Well, Fredrik, we're up to about the half an hour mark now. So I think we'll probably begin to wind up, if that's okay. There's stuff that I do want to cover off with you still, and I could talk to you for much longer than this. So I'd like the opportunity to invite you back in a few weeks' time, if possible, just to carry on this conversation. My parting comment and query on you really is going to be perhaps about the bigger picture within ITAD. And when you look at some of the drivers that you've referenced throughout, from global privacy laws and data protection laws are on the increase, complexity of technology is on the increase. There's a growing awareness of the impact on environment and sustainability is on the agenda. Budgets are always constrained. That's never going to go away. So people are very sensitive to value realization. You mentioned ITAD is very different now than it was 10 years ago. I've seen that. ADISA's been going 10 years now, and I've seen the industry evolve. Is this a good time to be an ITAD, do you think?
If you have the right ambition level and you see the new requirements as a positive challenge and you're able to rise and grab that as an opportunity, I think this is a great time to be in the ITAD industry. And we're starting to see this is actually quite an interesting phenomena. We're definitely starting to see that some ITAD vendors in certain markets are starting to build strong brand names. They become a brand name that people refer to as a go-to counterpart for sustainable IT, both when they are selling equipment as well as receiving the trust to process the equipment on the side that brings in the equipment for supply and demand. And a lot of them have had completely empty warehouses over the last few months because they've had such a strong presence, strong brand names. So when there has been a need to send out new equipment, they have been the first idea. Let's go to our ITAD vendor and buy 10,000 laptops to make sure that we can cope with this working from home, for example. So that branding, which would only happen in a fairly mature industry, is definitely something that I see evolving in quite a few markets. And that's interesting and encouraging. So yes, times are good to be in the ITAD industry, but you have to embrace the challenges and evolve constantly to meet the end customer demand.
Fantastic. Fredrik, well, that's a positive note to end on today. So I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me. And I would like to invite you back to chat further, if that's okay. For anybody listening, this is the first in a series of podcasts that we're going to create here at ADISA. They're all available on the ADISA YouTube channel. So if you Google ADISA Media Center, you'll be able to find us and you'll see the podcast popping up there. So Fredrik, thank you very much indeed, sir. And thank you for your time today.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you, Steve. And thank you for all the work that ADISA does as an organization. And I would be happy to return, and hopefully that can be via an aeroplane and we can actually be in the same room.
That would be very good. Thank you, Fredrik. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye.